Imagine a world where your 12th birthday isn't a celebration, but a countdown. Where playgrounds are replaced by wedding halls, and the first time you wear flowers in your hair, it's not for play but for your marriage. At just 12, your dreams are traded for duty. Your laughter silenced by ancient laws. Across centuries and continents, millions of girls had their childhoods stolen by a tradition they never chose. What does it feel like to have your life decided before you even understand it? This is the untold story of girlhood interrupted, and why it must never be forgotten. Imagine being 12 years old, and knowing that today is the day your childhood ends. Your hands, still rough from farm chores, tremble as strangers lead you into a silent room. Outside, church bells ring. Inside, an old man waits for you. In the medieval world, girlhood didn't fade away. It was stolen, in a single morning, by a ceremony you barely understood. What did it mean to become a wife before you'd even finished being a child? Across medieval Europe, much of the Islamic world, feudal Asia, parts of Africa, and the Middle East, the law permitted a girl to be married at just 12, sometimes even younger. Boys, usually only a few years older, were expected to shoulder the burden of supporting a family by 14 or 15. But it was the girls who paid the steepest price. Today, 12 is the age of playground laughter, after-school snacks, and secret dreams scribbled in notebooks. But centuries ago, it was the age when girlhood vanished, replaced by expectations far too heavy for such small shoulders. By the 12th century, the Catholic Church had carved these ages into law: 12 for girls, 14 for boys. This wasn't about choice, readiness, or love. It was about biology, cold, clinical, and unforgiving. If a girl could menstruate, she could bear children. If she could bear children, she could marry. That was the only logic that mattered. Religious leaders and lawmakers codified these ages into society's rules. A girl could be promised to a man she barely knew, sometimes while she was still learning to braid her hair. Among the powerful, child marriage became a weapon, an alliance, a way to end wars without raising a sword. An English nobleman might secure land in Scotland by marrying off his daughter, barely past puberty, to a rival's son. Girls became living chess pieces. They were moved, traded, and sacrificed for gains they'd never see. And behind each alliance was a child whose voice went unheard. But the story didn't end with vows whispered in candlelit halls. Once married, consummation was expected. Some husbands might wait a few years. Others wouldn't wait a single night. Law and custom offered little protection. For the young bride, there was no safe harbor. Her voice, so small, carried almost no weight in the home that was suddenly hers, and not hers at all. For royalty, marriage at 12 was a matter of politics. Princesses were shipped across foreign borders, sent to marry princes they'd never met, pawns in games that shaped the fate of kingdoms. For the daughters of peasants, it was about survival. A girl was one more mouth to feed in a hungry house. If she married at 12 or 13, that was one less burden, and sometimes her new family came with the promise of a few sacks of grain, a goat, or peace with a neighbor. Her groom might be a farm boy of 16. But just as often, he could be a widower in his 40s, carrying the scars of past lives and losses. These unions weren't built on love or partnership, or even basic kindness. They were bargains, arrangements designed to keep households afloat. Once the wedding ended, escape was nearly impossible. Divorce was rare. For a girl who tried to run, public shame was only the beginning. Families might refuse to take her back, fearing dishonor. Villagers could turn on her, branding her an outcast. Safety, once lost, was nearly impossible to find again. The records left behind are often heartbreakingly blunt. In 14th century France, one account describes a 13-year-old girl who threw herself into a river the night before her arranged wedding. The next day, her younger sister, just 11, was married in her place. What did marriage at 12 really look like? It was a world of endless labor. A peasant girl's day began before the first trace of sunlight. She'd rise quietly, careful not to wake her husband or in-laws, and hurry outside to feed livestock, gather water from distant wells, and stoke the kitchen fire. If she was already pregnant, as many young wives were, she worked through exhaustion, her body aching, her future shrinking with each passing hour. Childbirth at such a young age was a perilous gamble. The girl's body, still not fully grown, was often too small for a safe delivery. Medical care was rare and crude. Many died in labor. Others survived, but suffered life-altering injuries. Torn bodies, lifelong incontinence, wounds that marked them as broken in a world with little compassion. Still, the demands never stopped. A wife might be expected to bear 5, 10, or more children before she reached 30. Each pregnancy brought new risks and deeper isolation. Her value was measured in her obedience, her fertility, and her silence. Even in noble families, the walls of a castle offered little protection. A young girl adorned in pearls and silk was paraded through grand ceremonies, displayed as proof of her family's alliances. But when she wasn't needed, she was hidden away. Her days spent waiting, hoping, enduring. Autonomy barely existed. A girl's opinion, her laughter, her sorrow, none of it carried weight. Disobedience could mean punishment, even beatings. Her world narrowed to the rooms of her home and the rules of her husband. And yet, behind closed doors, a rare few managed to carve out space for themselves. Some outlived their husbands, becoming respected matriarchs who ruled households or estates in his absence. They navigated the harsh system and, in doing so, won a sliver of independence. But for most, the cycle continued, quiet, punishing, unchanging. Now we broaden the lens, showing cultural variations, the role of religion, and how traditions justified or sometimes slightly softened the harshness. Visual transitions and emotional hooks remain, drawing the viewer through centuries and across continents. Not every region treated child marriage exactly the same. In Renaissance Italy and under some interpretations of Islamic law, consummation was sometimes delayed, at least until a girl was older, more physically developed. The intention, at least on paper, was protection. But in practice, many men simply did not wait. Laws were words. Reality was power. Religion often stood as both shield and sword. In Christian Europe, the story of the Virgin Mary, believed to have been a teenager when she gave birth to Jesus, was used to justify young brides. Islamic traditions pointed to the marriage of Aisha to the Prophet Muhammad. In Hindu societies, early marriage was praised as a way to safeguard chastity. But nowhere, across all these faiths and cultures, did anyone stop to ask what the girl herself wanted. Her feelings, her fear, her stolen future. These questions went unspoken, the answers unimagined. Education for these married girls was almost non-existent. Most were never taught to read or write. Books, tutors, and lessons were treasures reserved for boys. Their minds, like their freedom, were left to wither behind closed doors. Still, exceptions flickered at the edges of history. Some girls grew into women who managed estates or negotiated truces after their husbands died. But these rare stories only highlight how suffocating the norm truly was. For centuries, child marriage was stitched deep into the fabric of society, a tradition so old it seemed unbreakable. But, eventually, the world began to shift. The winds of change. We move from deep-rooted tradition to the first signs of resistance, new ideas, and the slow, painful evolution toward protecting childhood. This segment uses pacing shifts and vivid contrasts to spotlight the tension between old and new. By the 17th and 18th centuries, cracks finally began to appear in the stone walls of tradition. The world was changing, slowly, and not without struggle. Philosophers of the Enlightenment, people like John Locke, challenged the very idea that childhood was just a waiting room for adulthood. They argued it was something precious, a stage deserving protection, not a hurdle to be cleared as quickly as possible. Their ideas spread, unsettling old beliefs and stirring new hopes. Sometimes it took scandal to force change. Public outrage erupted when aristocrats tried to marry young girls. Children, really. Dragging hidden realities into the daylight. Faced with growing criticism, lawmakers in some regions were pressured to raise the age of consent. It wasn't a revolution but a step. Education also played a part. As more schools opened their doors to girls, marriage was delayed. With knowledge came a new sense of self, and a flicker of independence their mothers and grandmothers had never known. But tradition is stubborn. Even as reforms inched forward, child marriage never disappeared completely. For every girl who found a classroom, millions remained trapped in the old patterns, silent, unseen, unheard. And the echoes of this history have never really faded. The modern legacy, connecting past to present, driving home the emotional message, and closing with a call to empathy and remembrance. Visual language and pacing remained cinematic to maximize impact. Even now, the shadow of child marriage still stretches across the world. Today, UNICEF estimates that over 12 million girls are married before the age of 18 every single year. In South Asia, West Africa, parts of Latin America, and even in corners of the United States, where legal loopholes linger. The reasons echo those of the past: poverty, tradition, family pressure, and a persistent belief that a girl's worth is measured by her obedience. The story of marrying at 12 is not just a relic of the Middle Ages. It's a living human story that refuses to end. It's a story of childhood stolen, of dreams interrupted, and of extraordinary resilience. Because despite the odds, many girls found ways to endure. They clung to secret hopes, passed down compassion to their children, and quietly, bravely, helped spark change across generations. So the next time you see the carved face of a young girl in an ancient cathedral, or stumble across the name of a noblewoman married at 12, look deeper. Don't just see a name in a book. See a life interrupted, a story that demands to be remembered. Because telling these histories isn't just about reliving the past. It's about shaping a future where no child is ever forced into a role they are too young to understand.